Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtedar, your host, and today I'm going to provide for you what I call as diplomatic briefing, where I briefly discuss some important developments in international relations which affect the United States, the world, and South Asia, particularly India. And so today I'm going to talk about the Munich conference which just ended. And I also will talk briefly about Pakistan to answer the question which I've been asked so frequently this week in the media: is Pakistan now a failed state? So before I begin my briefing, please subscribe to Conversations, like the video, and don't forget to press the bell icon. That is key to getting notifications of new videos on Conversations. So the 59th Munich International Security Conference just ended, and one of the highlights of the conference was on the sidelines, the meeting between Antony Blinken and Wang Yi, the foreign policy supremo of China and the US Secretary of State. There are three things that are critical about this meeting, in which one can notice that Antony Blinken continued to adopt the aggressive posture that the U.S. has adopted towards China, especially since the balloon incident. And so, in the meeting, three things were discussed, where Antony Blinken conveyed America's displeasure with China with regards to the balloon, send the message that this is violating America's sovereignty and America will not tolerate that, and that China has been doing this to many countries. They said 40 countries have been impacted by China's balloons, and the US finds it unacceptable and hopes that this will not happen again. And Blinken also basically conveyed his disappointment that China did not apologize for the balloon incident. China, on the other hand, says that America is unnecessarily getting hysterical about the balloon, and that many countries fly these balloons. China claims that the US has done the same thing over China multiple times in the last 1 year. And so they did not tender any apology. The second thing that Blinken raised is the issue that America has information that some Chinese companies are seriously contemplating providing lethal aid and exports to Russia. Basically, the possibility that Chinese start providing weapons or ammunition or something thereof to Russia, which will help Russia's war effort in Ukraine prolong the war, because one of the ways in which the West is hoping that they can enable Ukraine's victory is by basically dismantling the Russian economy and its capacity to do war. And if China provides more weapons or something in the vicinity of weapons, then it could prolong the war. The Chinese simply denied this, and the US has already imposed sanctions on a company that has shared images of Ukraine with Russia. So the US is serious about targeting American firms, which may help may help Russia in its war efforts in Ukraine. But one of the most interesting things in that meeting was the proposal that Blinken made, that even though there are diplomatic communications between China and the US, there is a lack of military-to-military communications between the two. And it is important for these two countries to have open channels of communication in order to avoid confusion and misperception or misunderstanding, which could lead to a lethal encounter. At the face of it, it sounds very promising that these countries are the two biggest economies in the world, and probably the two most powerful nations in the world, are proposing to communicate more. But it was also a reminder of the Cold War days, when there were so-called direct phone lines from the White House to the Kremlin. From the Russia perspective, from China, I'm not very sure that China is going to provide more weapons. China has been very careful. Even though it has definitely helped Russia. The trade between Russia and China this year touched $190 billion. And between Russia and China, India and China, Russia has done over $200 billion worth of trade. And that, I'm sure, has definitely helped in its war effort. But China has also proposed that on 24th of February, on the anniversary of the war, they are going to propose a peace plan, which has made the West very nervous. Western countries realize that if there is a good plan, a plan that can be implemented in some ways, and if the West rejects that plan, then the West will be seen as the warmonger, as that entity, especially Europe and the US, will be seen as responsible for prolonging the war and the misery that it is causing. And this could really resonate in the global south, where countries which are suffering high inflation, food insecurity as a result of the war will be convinced that Western geopolitical interests are essentially prolonging the war. So it's very critical to see what kind of a plan China comes up with. But nevertheless, the numbers that are coming out of China suggest that China has really done well. Number one, that China's trade with the US in 2022 was the highest ever, $690 billion, which suggests that this talk of decoupling and deglobalization is not really that serious. China's trade with Russia also went up exponentially. China has had one of the best years in a long time in exports, even though the exports have declined since October, November, December. That was probably because of the zero COVID policy. We will see how China does in 2023. But nevertheless, 2022 was pretty significant for China, economically speaking. So, two takeaways that while there is the talk between China and the US is very aggressive, the trade that keeps them interdependent is stronger than ever before. So that is an important point. And the second takeaway is that China is going to increase its diplomatic efforts with regards to Russia and Ukraine. On the second question of is Pakistan becoming a failed state, there are two things that I want to touch upon. Number one is the terrorist attack in Karachi. When we talk about terrorist groups would like to attack the targets of their choice and when they want. So if a terrorist group is really strong, then it attacks when it wants and where it wants. But when the terrorist groups are under pressure and the governments that are impacted by the terrorism of this group are effective, if counterterrorism strategies are effective, then you disrupt the planning and capabilities of terrorist groups. So then they cannot strike when they want, where they want. And they end up striking whenever they can and wherever they can. So it appears that TTP is able to attack when it wants, where it wants. It attacked Islamabad. The city got lucky that they were identified on the border, and the suicide bomber simply exploded the car on the outskirts of Islamabad. Then they attacked in Peshawar, and they attacked now in Karachi, the heart of urban Pakistan. And they're not just attacking randomly, they're going and attacking military headquarters and mosques where only cops pray and so on and so forth. So the TTP is showing the capacity to be able to identify a target and execute its terrorist attack. And it shows the complete failure of Pakistan's counterterrorism establishment. They are simply unable to constrain TTP, forget about dismantling TTP. So in that sense, from a security perspective, Pakistan, which is supposed to be a garrison state, a state which is heavily focused on security with its military as the most important institution, is failing in providing security to its country. And the second thing is that the deal with IMF has not come through, and it is quite possible that one can safely assume that Pakistan, even though it has not formally defaulted, has become a default state. Its credit ratings have been reduced by Fitch as well as Moody, which means getting more loans is going to be more difficult. Friends like China, UAE, and Saudi Arabia are unwilling to forgive loans, and IMF's conditions are getting stricter and stricter. And whether the Pakistanis agree or disagree with the IMF conditions and whether they implement the restructuring of the program, Pakistan is in the stage of restructuring. You can see its taxes are going up. It is cutting subsidies. So it is safe to assume that Pakistan has failed to manage its security and has failed to manage its economy. And I'm sorry to say that as a result of this escalating inflation, 33% already, there will not only be a rise in prices of essential commodities, but there will also be shortages in essential commodities that could lead to violence and disruptions. So basically, things are going to be really, really tough and painful for Pakistan in the near future, and the cycle will start recurring again when we go into 2024. So that is the situation. I don't think that Pakistan is a fully failed state or collapsed state, but it certainly does not have effective governance. And safe to say that the state, as well as the government and Pakistan's elite, have failed and are failing Pakistan significantly. So I hope you found this briefing on these two important issues interesting, thought-provoking. So please subscribe to Khanversations. Do share this video with your friends and your network. Don't forget to ring the bell icon. This is Muqtedar Khan, your host at Khanversations.